What's up, everyone? So Sony just dropped the brand new Sony A7R 6, and honestly, this thing feels absolutely ridiculous on paper. We're talking a 67 megapixel full-frame stacked sensor, 30 FPS burst shooting, pre-capture RAW, blackout-free shooting, 8K video, upgraded autofocus, faster sensor readout speeds, and somehow Sony still managed to cram all of this into a body that honestly feels pretty familiar if you've used the previous A7R cameras before. And right away, this camera feels like Sony basically looked at the high-end hybrid camera market and said, alright, let's just max everything out. Because seriously, the specs on this thing are kinda insane. Now, the moment everybody saw the Sony A7R 6 announcement, the obvious question immediately became, is this finally the perfect do-it-all camera? Because traditionally, the A7R series always leaned heavily toward resolution-first photographers, landscape shooters, studio photographers, commercial work, detailed product photography, stuff like that. Meanwhile, sports and wildlife shooters usually leaned more toward the faster bodies like the A1 or the A9 series. But now, Sony's kind of blurring those lines. Because getting 67 megapixels combined with 30 FPS electronic burst shooting is honestly wild, especially when you realize this thing also supports customizable pre-capture RAW shooting up to 1 second before you fully press the shutter. So basically, even if your timing is slightly late, the camera can still save frames from before you actually took the shot. And for wildlife photographers, sports shooters, birds in flight, fast-moving action, that's honestly a huge deal. Now, on top of that, Sony also massively improved the readout speed here. The electronic shutter readout now sits around 1/50th of a second instead of around 1/10th on the older A7R 5. And honestly, that matters way more than most people realize, because rolling shutter has always been one of the biggest weaknesses on ultra-high resolution cameras. Fast-moving subjects start bending, vehicles distort, quick pans look weird, propellers warp, all that stuff. But with the faster stacked sensor here, the A7R 6 handles that problem way better than previous models. And honestly, this is probably the first time an A7R camera genuinely feels comfortable trying to live in both worlds at the same time. Now, autofocus and real-world shooting improvements also sound seriously impressive here. Sony's real-time recognition AF Plus system has improved tracking, better subject recognition, and even improved small subject detection. And knowing Sony's autofocus reputation already, we honestly don't have too many concerns there. From all the early footage and previews we've seen so far, the autofocus performance looks extremely reliable. But here's the thing, the A7R 6 isn't just trying to win with headline specs. What actually surprised us more are some of the smaller usability improvements that honestly sound boring at first until you actually think about using them in real life. And weirdly enough, one of the coolest features on this camera might actually be the illuminated buttons. Seriously. At first, it sounds like one of those tiny little features nobody cares about, but if you've ever shot weddings, astrophotography, night events, or honestly anything in low light, you immediately understand why this matters. Because trying to find tiny camera buttons in complete darkness gets annoying fast, and Sony finally added backlit controls here. So now, instead of pulling your phone flashlight out every 5 minutes and ruining your night vision just to find the playback button or menu controls, you can actually see the important buttons illuminated on the back of the camera. And honestly, that's one of those quality of life upgrades that sounds small in a spec sheet, but feels massive during actual use. The camera also adds little tactile improvements too. There's a raised point near the lens mount to help align lenses in the dark. Even the auto mode area on the dial is slightly raised so you can identify it by feel. Again, tiny stuff, but this is the kind of attention to detail photographers actually appreciate during long shooting sessions. And honestly, Sony's grip redesign here also looks better than some of their older bodies. Sony grips have always been kinda hit or miss depending on hand size, but the A7R 6 seems noticeably more comfortable from what we've seen so far. Now, when it comes to the EVF and display setup, Sony didn't hold back either. The camera gets a massive 9.44 million dot OLED EVF with HDR and higher brightness capabilities. And honestly, brighter EVFs make a bigger difference than people think, especially outdoors in harsh sunlight. Being able to clearly compose your image without fighting glare constantly just makes shooting more enjoyable overall. Then we've also got the fully articulating 3.2-inch LCD, dual CF Express Type A and SD card slots, improved battery life, and blackout-free shooting at 30 FPS. So yeah, feature-wise, this thing feels stacked. And then there's the video side. 4K up to 120 FPS, 8K up to 30 FPS with a slight crop, 16-bit raw video output through HDMI. So even though this is technically still part of Sony's high-resolution photography-focused lineup, the video capabilities here honestly look extremely serious too. Now, with all that said, here's where the catch starts coming in, because the Sony A7R6 almost feels too powerful for most people. And honestly, that's not even criticism toward the camera itself. It's more about where modern cameras are right now in general. Because let's be real here, cameras have already been amazing for years now. The Nikon D850 was incredible. The Canon EOS R5 was incredible. The Nikon Z8 and Z9 are incredible. Even the older Sony A7R5 is still an insanely capable camera today. So now we've kind of entered this weird stage where cameras aren't really solving massive problems anymore. They're refining things, improving convenience, adding luxury-level features, making life slightly easier. And the Sony A7R6 honestly feels exactly like that. Because yes, 67 megapixels sounds incredible, but that also means gigantic file sizes, massive storage requirements, faster memory cards, bigger editing workloads, more expensive backup storage, stronger computers for editing. And honestly, not everybody actually needs that. Same thing with 30 FPS raw bursts. It sounds amazing, and it is amazing, but realistically, most photographers probably aren't shooting thousands of ultra-high resolution raw files every single day. Then there's the price, around $4,500 for the body alone, and man, that's serious money. At that price point, you really have to ask yourself whether you truly need this level of performance or whether you simply want this level of performance, because there's a difference. If you're coming from something much older like an A7R3 or maybe even an A7R4, then honestly the jump here probably feels huge. Faster everything, smarter autofocus, massively improved readout speeds, better usability, better EVF, improved ergonomics, all that stuff adds up quickly. But if you already own something like the A7R5, honestly that becomes a harder conversation, because the older camera is still extremely good. And that's honestly the biggest catch with the Sony A7R6. It's so good that most people probably won't fully utilize everything it can actually do. And weirdly enough, that's also what makes it impressive, because Sony didn't just make a camera with one standout feature here. They basically pushed almost every category at once: speed, resolution, autofocus, usability, low light controls, EVF quality, video capability, readout speed. Everything got better. So overall, the Sony A7R6 genuinely looks like one of the most complete high-resolution hybrid cameras we've seen in a while. It's ridiculously fast for a 67-megapixel body, the autofocus looks extremely capable, the usability upgrades actually feel meaningful, and honestly, Sony finally seems to be paying more attention to the real-world shooting experience instead of just chasing spec sheet numbers. But at the same time, this camera also feels like the definition of a want camera rather than a need camera, because for a lot of photographers, the cameras they already own are probably still more than good enough. But man, if you're somebody chasing the absolute best combination of resolution, speed, modern autofocus, and premium hybrid performance all inside one body, the Sony A7R6 honestly looks like an absolute monster right now. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this one. Let us know down in the comments, if you had the money, would you actually upgrade to the Sony A7R6, or do you think modern cameras are already good enough at this point? Because honestly, this thing feels insanely impressive, but it also kind of shows just how crazy camera technology has already become. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe for more camera and tech content like this, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.